Say anything.
Why can't you just say anything?
I'm gonna say anything.
People just say anything.
I swear, people just say anything. Welcome to Say Anything with Keena B.
Okay, welcome. Welcome to Memphis Market, located in Quincy, Florida, 23 North Madison Street. And today we have artist and author Kayla Thompson. I want you all to welcome her. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. And how about you? How you doing?
Doing all right.
Good. Count the squat. Are you gonna get some tea?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay.
Oh, we'll come. Hold on. We shall wait.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. Count the squat.
So kind.
I think I'm used to seeing you. Is it you? Am I confusing you with somebody? Have you been here before?
No, ma'am.
I am confusing you with somebody. Do you have a sister?
Not one bit.
You said no?
No. I have two older brothers, and they don't even live here. You know that happened to me. Say it again? Yeah, I've heard that before. Someone said, you look just like someone. And I'm like,
no, and I recently met her, so that's why I'm like, wow. Okay. Well, hello. I'm Keena.
Victoria.
Nice to meet you. We are recording,
Okay.
but you are free to ask questions of the artist, of the author. Okay? But first, an introduction. Kayla Thompson is an artist and author who graduated from FAMU University. And I looked up an article that they did on you at the FAMU in your senior year.
Yes.
And one particular quote stood out to me that you cited when you were talking about your work and what you want to do in the future. So I'm just going to recite that. It says, if you are passionate in the arts, don't let what anybody says stop you from creating. If that's what you want to do, then don't let anyone say starving artists or artists don't get paid. It's not about the money. It's about if you're happy with your creating, then that's all that matters.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's a good reminder because I need that for myself.
Yeah. And today we are celebrating her first published work, Poetry and Songs. It is a book of haikus. And we love that for you. Let's start off with an introduction of your work.
Okay.
Why Poetry and Songs?
So, poetry was another avenue for me to just express myself. Growing up, I struggled with communicating. I was a big crier, so I would never be able to get my words out. And it was actually my second love. So I fell in love with music first. I loved classical music. I was in the band, so I was listening to a lot of things that did not have words. And so I have all these emotions, I have all these feelings, and so poetry was a way for me to listen to instrumentals and then write my own words or emotions to what I was feeling or experiencing with those classical musics. And so if you're familiar with poetry or the Book of Psalms in the Bible, and you actually read through it all, even the first chapter, there's a lot of just fluctuation in emotions. The psalmist, one being David, at one point he's saying, God, you're so great, you're so good, and then and the next breath he's like, God, why have you forsaken me? My enemies are coming to get me. Like, oh my gosh, like it's just back and forth throughout the whole poem. And so I thought this was just a great introduction to me, knowing that I grew up struggling with emotions, and I'm constantly feeling this fluctuation of emotions on a day-to-day, but more specifically in my relationships. And so yeah, that's why the title is that way. I don't normally do haikus. I have a variety of just longer poems, but as I navigated through my relationships, I realized that sometimes I was over-explaining, or I was doing too much justification for that other person, and I was enabling behavior, and I was just saying too much. And of course, sometimes you sound like a broken record, so a haiku was my way of just saying, this is what it is, period.
I love that. I love that. Okay, you utilized it as a short form of just getting to the point of what you're trying to get across.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, and I never thought of it in that way before.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Would you like to start with
Yes.
the first reading?
So this is a good one. It says, you would say it first, knowing how I will respond. Yes, I love you more. And that's just one of my situationships that I was in. We would do this thing where he would say, you know, I love you, and I would say, I love you more. And that was just my way of saying, yes, I love you more, but also in my heart, being that it was a situationship and never like an actual relationship, committed relationship, I knew that at the end of it, I truly love this person more than they love me. And so it is listed in the first perspective, which is problems, because clearly loving someone more, that can cause a lot of problems. Knowing that that person might not love you on the same level, of course, can cause a lot of problems, but it caused a lot of inner conflict with myself and my relationship with God, because I was focused on me loving someone more, and then God was like, well, I love you more. So let's talk about that relationship.
God, you better get deep. You
Yeah.
mentioned sections.
Yes.
Can you explain your sections?
Yeah, so I have 3 of them. It goes kind of with primary colors. It's part of my brand, the Trinity. And so problems is the first perspective. You know, sometimes we focus on our problems. We feel as though we experience problem after problem after problem, or it might be a problem, a great point in time, and another problem. And then after our problem, or in the midst of our problem, we have this sort of process. So that's the second perspective. And so you start to think about why you're feeling what you're feeling, and you want to get to the root of it, and you want to dissect it more, and, you know, practice that self-awareness. And then the third perspective is empowerment. So throughout this journey, yes, you have a problem, yes, you're triggered, yes, you're dealing with X, Y, and Z, you process it, and now you're coming out like, I can do this, like that was nothing, or like, you know, I feel better, like I learned something. And so those are the 3 perspectives.
Awesome. Okay. Let's hear some more.
Okie dokie. Do we want to hear another one in problems?
Yeah, let's hear another
okay.
one in problems.
Okay, I like this one on page 11, and you all won't really be able to see it, but if you turn to the page on 11, it says, nothing was broken, thank you for not promising, no need for fixing. However, if you actually have the copy, you'll see that nothing, not, and no are crossed out. And so if you reread it, it says, was broken, thank you for promising, need for fixing. And I love being able to play with that haiku, because, you know, I'm trying to say that I'm okay, but then clearly the underlying root, like there's something wrong. Like I am broken, I need fixing. Like you did promise, whether you actually use the word promise or not. And I did have expectations that were not met. So.
And we were speaking earlier, prior to starting, that I loved how she was using the graphics within the poetry itself to kind of illuminate that. Can you express more why you decided to illuminate your poetry in that way?
Yeah. So one, I've just never seen it in books. I took my only topography class in my senior year at FAMU, and I just had so much fun. I just had a blast knowing that it was all these different fonts, and I'm an artist that understands that there's a variety amount of artists out there. And so when I learned about typography, I was like, that's just another form of art. How can I make my own font? But let's, start off with just like learning the basics. And I enjoyed being able to play around with it. One of my favorite quotes and one of my favorite projects I did in that class was by Edgar Allan Poe. He has a quote that said, I was never insane except upon occasions when my heart was touched. And that was the first time I played with like crossing out, not, and all these things, and like making the font, changing the font and having like red text and things like that, and making it, vertical and diagonal. And I just really loved how it just brought that quote to life, and making it more visually appealing to whoever was looking at it. So that was my first experience playing with that, and I was able to incorporate it.
I love that. I do love that. I was expressing to her that for the visual reader, for the person who or for a person who might struggle with poetry, just reading it on the page, that having those visuals was really great to be able to just highlight, to lift it off the page. Okay, so let's read from the second perspective.
Okay, so now we are in process. So before I read mine, growing up, there's 3 of us. I'm the middle child. I know people say things about the middle child. I still don't understand. But even though there was 3 of us total, I did a lot of reflecting. I was, in my room a lot, just thinking about what was going on in my environment, relationships with my parents, things like that, trying to make sense of everything. And so process was kind of like, I wouldn't say it's my favorite perspective, but I do a lot of thinking. I'm a very methodical person. I'm always thinking about all the perspectives in whatever situation I find myself in. And so on page 39, it says, I enabled it. You came and went as you please. Close sign, open door. And that one is more so a moment that hit me where I was, again, enabling things. I wasn't really setting clear boundaries. I was still allowing certain things to happen that I had an issue with. So even though I would mention it, and I would say, don't do this ever again. This hurt me when you did X, Y, and Z. I still allowed it because I still embraced that person. I still invited them back in my home. And that gives off the wrong impression. So if you're going to a store and it says closed sign, but the door is wide open, people are gonna be like, well, are you open or are you closed? Like, what are you really trying to convey? So, yeah.
That is something I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Let's do
As
another.
much as I try to set boundaries, it can be a little tough when you feeling all the loves and the butterflies. Let's see. Oh, on page 42. So it says, not starting over, recycling through pieces, mosaic healing. If you are familiar with mosaic artwork, it's a lot of different broken, tiles and pieces. And if you're familiar with just recycling, you're using, recycled material. You're reusing something that was already being used in something else, or breaking it down to use it in a different form. When it comes to art, those are known as found materials. And so throughout this process of being, falling in love or liking someone and then going through heartbreak, there was times where I was just like, oh, I'm back at, square one. Like, I'm doing this all over again. Like, I'm not getting anywhere. And so this was a moment where I was like, I'm not starting over. I'm learning from this. I'm able to create something new out of this. I, am taking pieces of myself that, yes, is broken, that feels X, Y, and Z, but I'm sifting through them and I'm gonna make something beautiful out in the end of this.
That's awesome. I want to take a moment to talk about your cover.
Yes.
Because you created your cover.
Yeah.
Think about that.
This was a process. Oh my gosh. So I love mazes, going back to me I love thinking, I love brain games, I love puzzles, I love Sudoku. I just love things that really take my mind off of everything else, and I really have to focus. And I love a good challenge. I love competitive growing up, still can be, but I love being able to solve something. And so being that, if you're familiar with a maze, is usually, one entry, one exit. However, going back to my brand being primary colors and it's focusing on the Trinity, I have 3 entries and they all go to the center. But of course they're all going, their own journey. They're all experiencing a different path, but they're all meeting in the middle. And so that's just a representation to say, wherever you start, wherever your path may lead you, you're gonna get to the center of who you are. You're gonna get back to the root of who you are. You're gonna figure out the root of an issue that you may experience, or you might find your core, your center, and be who, or not be, pretty much end up becoming who you need to be, and remaining true to yourself.
Word.
Yes, a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, I love it though. Because you can tell that you actually put a whole lot of energy into the different levels of not only the poetry itself, but the artistry of it. And to me, that brings more meaning and depth to it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to the third perspective.
Empowered. Yes. Which one do I want to read? We'll start with 62 because a lot of people don't know this about me. I'll read it and then I'll share more. But on page 62, it says, butterflies scared me. So much of me is changing. Metamorphosis. Growing up, I was terrified of butterflies. I probably overcame that fear maybe 4 years ago. Sometimes I still jump if they're too big and they get too close. And it goes back to when I was a kid and I was probably like this high. I was outside playing and this black and white butterfly just kept following me and it just would not ease up. And like even when I went inside, it was like hitting the window and like it was just intense. And you know, I don't know if you all are familiar with the SpongeBob episode, but when he like zooms into the butterfly, you see all like it just freaked me out. And I just felt like, you know, even though I was tall or I was bigger than, you know, the butterfly, I just felt like it was gonna carry me away. And so that traumatized me for a very long time. But when I was listening to a sermon and the gentleman was breaking down what metamorphosis meant and like what it looked like for the butterfly, and that its entire DNA is changing within its, you know, cocoon. And it's, you know, turning into this beautiful thing. So although, you know, it looks gross and it's, you know, no longer recognizable and it's different, it's coming out and it's becoming something, you know, even better. And so throughout this season, I really tried to embrace butterflies and metamorphosis and changing. I even have a tattoo of it. So which is funny because some people are like, oh, well, people who know me, like my grandma, she was like, why do you have a butterfly? You're scared of him. I'm like, I'm embracing it, grandma, growth, relax. So yeah.
Awesome. Before we get to the last haiku, was there any questions from?
I have a question. So, out of all the sections, which one did you find the most difficult to write?
And just to repeat, it's all of all the sections, which was the most difficult?
That's a good question. Definitely wasn't problems, because that just seems like it came easy. Maybe empowered. I'm really trying to think about like my Google Doc, and because there was a lot of rearranging, some haikus I felt like fit in other perspectives, so I had to play around with it a bit. But being that I'm an artist and just a human being, we can be our biggest critics. But something I try to tell myself and my students is that we also need to be our biggest supporters as well. And I can just be very hard on myself. Encouraging myself is something that I can do, but sometimes, you know, I want that from others. You know, it's hard for me to pick myself up by the bootstraps and keep on going. So I would say empowered, because throughout just romantic relationships and just relationships in general, and I was actually talking about this morning, there was a question that really hurt my heart a few months ago, and I had to ask myself, why doesn't anyone want me? Like, what is it about me that people like just don't want to, again, coming more so from like a romantic standpoint. And so I had to go all the way back to, you know, the beginning and dad and, you know, relationships just growing up and things like that. And so empowering myself in spite of all the A through Z's. I would say that was probably the most difficult to write.
You said that in a way that I almost feel like, are you still believing that?
No, not as often.
Okay.
It's still like creep sometimes, but it's rare. Yeah. It's just because I just talked about it this morning because I was talking about the book, so it's just fresh in my mind. But I'm that girl, and I know that's and right. I say that in empowered. So yeah,
that's what I say that girl. Yes. Okay.
Let me see if I can find it because I said it. I ain't say it like that, but I said it a little bit. On 78, it says, "Over here tripping, like I'm too damn fine. Are you kidding me?" The words are written itself.
Yeah, in French. to be here and allowing me to be a part of your journey when it comes to television. And where do we get the book?
So you can get it right here, right now. But you can also get it at Amazon. Poetry of Psalms on Amazon.com, and hopefully in the near future, other locations. But yeah, right now Amazon and right here, right now.
All right. Thank you. This concludes the discussion reading portion. We're moving into the signing portion. So